Welcome back, everybody, back once again, back here with Justin Murphy and Victor De La Flor, and we are going to talk about a kind of a capstone. We're trying to get to the end of an era with Justin's journey. We still got a little bit more to go, but we have transitioned fully into a civilian position. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to dig into some things about contracting in GS. We're going to talk about how the government hires, some BDD stuff, some healthcare stuff. So let's get into it. Welcome back, Justin.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Happy New Year. Hope everyone had lovely holidays. But yeah, good to be back. Happy to give some updates. There's been quite a few since we spoke, a little over a month ago, 4 or 5 weeks. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to, share my experience for other people to benefit from.
Yeah, and also just real quickly before we get into it, for those of you who don't know, you can check Justin out on LinkedIn. He's got some nice little write-ups of his transition journey along the way as well, some updates on there. So you can go check that out and keep up to speed and keep up the tabs on what he's doing. If you're in the process of getting out, transitioning, you want to get some tips and tricks or ideas about the transition process. But so let's jump right into this job thing and how it all panned out. And maybe you can walk us through your thought processes as you were going through the different jobs that were offered to you that you were applying for and those kind of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love to. And so I think last time we picked up, I'd done plenty of interviews. It was mid-December. I think I had gotten one offer up to that point, but the start date was like back in October. Obviously, I was still on active duty, so I had to decline that one. And then I actually got one offer for a GS-14 position on Fort Belvoir. And it provided some relief, right? It's like, oh, okay, I have a job offer. I mean, I accepted the tentative offer. I wasn't super stoked with it, just the position, because to be quite honest, it was, it was almost too familiar with what I had done previously for the last, 14 years or so. And so I was kind of trying to use this transition as kind of a way to kind of break out of the mold, right? A little more freedom, a little more flexibility. So while it was, it was what I wanted, I wasn't enthusiastic about it. But I was ready to go forward with it. But then I actually got another offer, the position I actually accepted at the Department of Labor. And that, it was a higher pay grade, but it was also more interesting work, right? It felt like I had, I'm going to have more autonomy, more authority, and it's just interesting casework. But really, it's just making me uncomfortable, right? And I think that's really the only way you're going to grow is to just be uncomfortable, learn new things, fail, grow, so on and so forth. And so that was really what, really made the position intriguing. So accepted it. I think it was the week of Christmas, maybe, or the week prior. I think it was a week, like the very end of the week prior to Christmas. So accepted the tentative offer, went in and did fingerprints like the last working day before Christmas. Obviously, that went through pretty quickly because it's didn't require security clearance, and then got the final offer right at the end of the year and accepted that, and just went in on Tuesday was my first day because of the federal holiday on Monday. So just wrapped up my first week at the Department of Labor. Officially, I'm an administrative officer for 3 basically appeals boards up there, that they have. So they've got the Employees Compensation Appeals Board, the Administrative Review Board, and the Benefits Review Board. And so I'm officially assigned to ECAB. I'm basically shared throughout the 3 boards that I'm supposed to support. So basically, I work for 3 head judges of the 3 appeals boards at the Department of Labor. So pretty interesting work. Obviously, I'm nervous as hell because new organization, new mission. Obviously there's no way to avoid the imposter syndrome, right? You feel like, oh, how do I get this job? Like, I'm definitely not qualified, but just trying to work through some of the mental hurdles with that. But like I said, I survived the first week. Everyone that was there, super excited, super happy I'm there. I heard a million times how impressed they were with my qualifications and my energy, I guess. So looking forward to it. But yeah, kind of crossed that hurdle. I feel like it was a huge success. I got, I think, exactly what I was looking for. So yeah, so that piece, check the box on employment. And so yeah, I found a new home.
Hey, Justin, that's awesome, man. I don't think you need to have that imposter syndrome because your qualifications speak for themselves, and I think you may need to share that resume with me at some point in time. Uh, no, so Department of Labor, right? So it's
Yep.
not a a say like an Army job, U.S. Army, or supporting like the Navy or Marine Corps, things like that. And it is in fact a GS position, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I mean, one thing that really does kind of hinder, and I mean, it's, it's the law, and you can bitch and gripe about it as much as you want, but it's the facts. It's the 180 days, stipulation for service members, which I think is a travesty. And I understand the intent behind it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like everything in military fashion, it's mass punishment for a very few individuals who have either abused the system in the past or would be in a position to abuse the system, right? So you're thinking very senior level leaders who would create a civilian position to basically employ themselves after retirement. And so, you can get a waiver, but it's a process. And I've served as a hiring manager working through the process to get someone 180 waiver, and it is not easy. It's not fun, and it takes time. And we've actually lost people to other positions because the process just took so long. And so, like I said, that the initial position I accepted at Fort Belvoir was a DoD position, and I was going to have to go through the waiver process. And obviously, I wasn't excited because, I mean, I was ready to get to work, right? And so I knew it was going to be a headache. But fortunately, that only applies for DoD, right? So any of the other federal agencies, there's no requirement for that. So, so the DOL was able to bring me on, right away, really.
And that's actually that was going to be my question too. Was there any waiver put in place? But being that it's not DoD, being that it is DOL, there is no waiver
Yeah.
necessary, right? There you
No,
can go
not at all.
straight
It's only
from active
DoD.
duty to that.
Yeah, and if you look at federal statute, anyone who's on transition terminal leave from the U.S. military can onboard with another federal agency while they're in a transition terminal leave status. It's the only hiccup is that that DoD and that pesky 180-day rule.
That's right. That's right. Now I'd like to ask you. So are you taking any terminal leave?
I actually just started terminal leave this past week. I think.
All
I
right.
think it
So you're doing
started
the
on
terminal
the
leave
17th. Yeah. So I
and
mean,
the DOL.
yeah. So I'm going to be on terminal leave to the end. 31st of March. My retirement date is 1 April. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
officially still on the Army's roster. I'm just in a leave status, and I will be through the end of March.
That's an excellent position to be in, man.
Yeah,
That's
no, I mean
good.
the lag time was literally like 2 weeks, and I mean the only reason, right, is the holiday season. People,
Yep.
people want to get back to the office, and so that's probably why I didn't start like right after the first of
Hmm.
the year. But for second pay period in January, and so I was very minimal lag time where I was sitting around twiddling my thumbs, so it seemed like a long time, but in retrospect, it really wasn't.
Yeah, and as far as that first week, how's that first week feel to you? Does it feel like what you expected, or do you have any other expectations of it, or?
I don't know. I mean, you try to prepare. It's different. I mean, you're a civilian, right? It's like, obviously, I'm not wearing a uniform. Putting the wardrobe, I mean, we could have a 30-minute conversation on that and what a struggle. I mean, that's been my biggest stress probably over the last 30 days is trying to put together a wardrobe. I had one suit in my closet that I had bought, about a year ago for the job interviews, and I was doing my fellowship with Hill Vets, but and I had some dress shirts and things like that. But other than that, it was mostly casual wear, some button ups. But it's like so. I'm buying suits, I'm buying blazers, I'm buying slacks, I'm trying to buy new shoes, and just in typical fashion, it's like I want to get it. I want good quality. I don't want to overpay, right? I don't need name brand stuff. I just want good quality. So and then trying to order stuff through the internet, you get it doesn't fit right, you return it. You get another size that doesn't fit right, you return, and it's a painstaking process. But really, my biggest concern was like I wanted to fit in, right? I didn't want to be like the military guy. I wanted to, just fit in with it. I wanted to look like everybody else, right? So I had a conversation with my new supervisor before I got there because I wanted to know. And when I'm, I said I just kind of wanted like an onboarding schedule and the talk, but really my main concern I wanted to get is like, what do people wear there? because I don't want to I'm not going to underdress, but I also didn't want to overdress. And so, I kind of got the lowdown on it, and so I would say I'm probably pretty well dressed compared to most people there. I think standards have probably laxed in the last few years with, COVID and the pandemic and work from home and things like that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's different. I was talking to my wife about, well, what am I going to get for a haircut? Like, I still haven't made some big transformation because I don't really like bushy sideburns, but maybe wearing my hair a little bit longer, having to put together an outfit every day. But yeah, I mean, the first week went well. Like I said, everyone was really nice. I mean, they're just people, right? We're all just people. So it's not like there's a huge disparity in the type of people I'm working with. I've worked with civilians in the DoD for, 2 decades. It's just a little different. I mean, I wouldn't notice, I didn't notice a huge difference. Other than the additional challenges of like putting together an outfit and things like that. So, but I'm also only one weekend, so time will tell.
No.
I'm there with you with the whole civilianize myself thing, because I same thing when I retired and I started this new position. I didn't know exactly what to wear. I was even asking my wife, like, what do people wear at your job? Do I wear like what kind of shoes? So I went to my first day at work was in a suit. And they told me, hey, this is business casual. You don't have to wear a suit every day. I'm like, okay, well, great. So I immediately went and bought a bunch of like, shirts, polo shirts, belts, because you don't know. You're in a uniform for 20 plus years. You don't know exactly, what they're wearing in the civilian world. But yeah, I'm with you on that. So let me ask you about this job. So, did you, in fact, tap into your network in order to get a position like this? Did that have any play or anything with it?
No, and I mean, maybe I'm living in a fantasy world. I truly do believe in meritocracy, right? It's, things are earned, nothing's really deserved. And I understand it's not so the truth. But the reason I kind of like the federal government is, I mean, there's certain authorities where you can get direct hire positions, or you can get like a VEOA appointment, which I believe only goes up to like GS11 maybe. So, but I mean, for the most part, I mean, you can't like just rub shoulders with unless it's like a political appointment, but you can't just rub shoulders with somebody and get a job, right? There's a process. You have to, there's protections in place. So no, to be honest, I don't know. Actually, I do know someone that works at the Department of Labor, but he's a claims examiner. He lives out in Oklahoma. But other than that, I don't know anybody that works in the Department of Labor at all. So this was just a blind application on USA Jobs, submitted my resume, maybe a month, 6 weeks later, got, asked to interviewed, and then I heard from them, maybe a week or two later. So no, definitely didn't know anybody, didn't tap into my, network or anything like that. Just, blind application on USA Jobs.
No, I'd like to ask, same as I did at one point in time. I was submitting application after application, and then I got a few offers, a few emails back. I assume that you submitted your resume to several positions, aside from this one, and your hunt for a new position.
Oh yeah, so I went. I went back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. All in all, I went and added it up just, to have provide some clarity. But no, I applied for over 200 positions. And I think my failure rate was like 84%. So 84% of the positions I applied for, either didn't get contacted at all, I got a rejection notice or whatever, basically. So only 16% of those 200 did I actually even get asked to interview. So, I mean, and I knew that going in, right? And so, to me, it's almost like sales, right? It's a volume game. It's just strictly numbers. Because one thing I did, I came to the realization is that you can't please everybody, right? You're not going to make the perfect resume where 100% of the people who look at it are like, this is the person I want to interview. Like, it's just not going to happen. You can't please everybody because some people might not like military service because they think they're out of touch, or whatever. The competition might just be fierce. There just might be super qualified people that also want this position, which you have no control over. So it's just, for me, it was just a volume game, right? Look for positions that met my criteria that I thought, I was qualified for or I would be interested in, apply. forget about it, move on to the next, and just repeat over and over and over and over again. And again, eventually, the emails or the phone calls, for offers to interview came in, and so on and so forth. And so I truly think it's a volume game. I talk to people, and I think too many people are fixated on like a few positions. And they're like, man, there's this great job. I saw it. I applied for it. And like, they just kind of stop because they think they're just going to get notice on it. And I think you're going to be in for a rude awakening that the odds are stacked against you. And so I wouldn't get what I call one-itis, fixated on a position or a couple positions and just stop. I mean, if you get called on it, great. That's a great option. But I would say the chances, unless you know somebody, unless it's in a private sector job where you know the hiring manager, you know someone that carries some weight that's going to give you a great referral, I would just apply and move on and just keep doing it until you find something that you like.
Yeah, that's great to know, because I've encountered a lot of folks who get out, a lot of veterans who really get down on that, right? It affects their mental state, because they figure, I'm applying to all these jobs and nobody really wants me, right? But you're proof, you submitted over 200 resumes, and, you kind of kept your options open, and then something opened up for you. So anybody out there listening, you need to apply. It is a numbers game. You need to apply to a whole lot of places in order to get seen by at least one. Your rate was what, 84%, you said? That's insane. But something opened up for you. Incredible.
I started applying maybe like last March. There's some that I applied for that if you look at the status, they're still reviewing applications 10 months later, right? So that's why I'm like, don't get fixated, because you don't, the hiring manager might have, moved on from that position, and now that's in a stalemate. Like, you just don't know. So just, apply and move on. And that would be my biggest suggestion. Because eventually at some point, someone, you're at least going to get an opportunity. But yeah, just get used to rejection. Yeah, I don't even know how many rejection notices I got. A lot.
Were there any of them that you went back and contested after the fact? Like maybe you saw that they rejected you for some silly little reason. Did you ever contact any hiring managers?
That's actually a really good question. So when I first so I don't know, and this was just through USA Jobs. So if you go, right, so the way it works is when you look for positions, right, there's different qualifications, like who they're going to advertise, like who's basically eligible to apply, right? Sometimes it's only for internal employees, like, and that's just the way it is. Sometimes, it'll be open to the public, which is basically anybody who's eligible to work there. And sometimes it's in between, right? You've got military spouses or veterans or internal employees, or, and so you have to go. And so the first step when you apply for something, and there's like at least a dozen questions, and what they're trying to make sure is your eligibility, right? And it's just button questions. And so after a while, you get used to it. But at the beginning, you're like reading through this and you're like, oh, I'm not qualified. So if you hit the wrong button and you don't select a place where you're eligible, like, you won't get referred because they think you're not eligible. So you really need to read. And by the end, you figure it out. Like, if you're applying for veteran status, based on veteran status, it's usually the last eligibility out of like the 12 questions. And so it'll usually say something like, did you serve honorably for 3 years or something like that? And if you hit yes, then you'll get it. So there were some times, and I actually did call like the HR specialist, like, I keep getting rejected from these. What's the problem? And then she kind of explained it, and I went back and read it, and I was like, oh, I didn't click the right button. So that was the only time. But I even asked her, I was like, is there any way to retroactively go back and change that? She said, no, once the announcement closes, you can't change it. But you can change it up to the point where it closes. But honestly, I didn't going to contest anything, because it probably just a waste of my time. It's just a waste of energy and time. And it's like, I'd rather spend that, going after other jobs.
Now, did you, are there any specific ways you formatted your resume when you submitted it to these positions? Like, use any keywords?
Yeah. So, I went through, so in the Army, they call it SFL TAP, right? Soldier for Life. But, and I can't remember what the Marines call it, but you have to go through the mandatory classes. And one of them's like resume writing. And, and I'm sure it's great for some people. because the other part that I was kind of, peeved about is they didn't separate retirees from everybody. It was just one group. And so the person that just finished their first enlistment, probably needs more attention and support than the person that's retiring, right? Just because their experience level, their age, their aptitude, their, institutional education is probably a lot higher. So I don't think I gained a lot from that. And so, I like to say I kind of broke the rules a little bit. As I've heard numerous times, right? For federal, you need to have like 2 separate resumes, right? You need to have one condensed resume for civilian jobs, and if you're going to apply for federal jobs, it needs to be like 4 to 5 pages. And I was like, no. And it could, again, it could be some arrogance, it could be some laziness, right? And I was just like, I'm not going to do that. And I had talked to Andrew, who was my mentor through ACP, because I had shown him my resume during our first meeting, and there were a couple like little typos, but nothing crazy. And one thing he told me is, there's no way to make the perfect resume, right? Some people might think it's magnificent, some people might think it's in the middle, some people not like it. You're not going to please everybody. So I just used the same resume for every single position I applied for. It was like a 2-page resume. I mean, it didn't even cover my full military experience. I went back to like 2010, 11. I think, when I got to Fort Irwin, so that'd have been like 2011, which covers the last, 12 years or something like that. Because, I mean, in actuality, I don't think anybody is looking beyond a decade of what you've done because it fit on 2 pages. And I know as being kind of a hiring manager or reviewing resumes for hiring managers, like, nobody wants to look through a 5-page resume. I've gotten some that are like 10 pages. And it's like, when you get a position where you get 50 to 100 applications, you're not looking at that many resumes. You'll probably look at, maybe their last couple positions, and hopefully they've been relevant to the requirements of this job, and maybe like the formal education. But like, that's it. Like, nobody was going to care what I did as my enlisted time back in 2005. So I'm like, I'm not putting it on there, right? And I also didn't want to put a bunch of fluff in there. Just, I didn't want to have words on a page just to have words on a page. So no, I highlighted, what I thought my biggest accomplishments were for the last positions that went back to 2011. And that's what I ran with, right? So, and, it was, I guess it was unconventional compared to all the advice that they give for applying for federal jobs. And, there were some positions I didn't get, or I didn't qualify for because I didn't have, the 5 W's for everything, right? They want like the number of hours worked a week. I didn't put that I had worked 40 hours. I mean, if I'm not going to get an interview or even be considered because I didn't put that I put on my resume that each position was 40 hours a week, like, maybe that's not an organization I want to work for. So anyway, so, because I honestly, just me, I'm kind of a perfectionist. I think it looks kind of cheesy, right? 40 hours a week. This was my salary, blah, blah, blah. Like, no. So, I would say I didn't get rejected too many times for not having the traditional resume or, hitting all the 5 W's that they say to, but I think I got more than enough interest. So yeah, use the same resume for every single job I applied for.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, because at least when I went to the TRS, right, the transition readiness seminar, the federal side, they always tell you, tailor your resume, and there's an outline that's provided by USA Jobs. And that's what I downloaded, and that's kind of what I went off of. But it's good to know that, that's not the only way to do it. I mean, you're proof of that. Did you end up using any kind of resume services that were available to like veterans or active duty that were getting out?
No. And so what I used is, I use referrals from everyone. I always ask people. And so what I did is I actually talked to a couple colleagues who had retired before me, and they were more than helping me to give me their resume. And I just used their template, right? I just tailored it. I wanted to look, visually appealing, tailored the font, the spacing and things like that. So no, I didn't use any service. I kind of just, I kind of went with what I thought looked good. And, and again, it could be some stubbornness, right? Some arrogance in there. Like, I know what looks best. But that's kind of what I went with. Because really you want something that kind of catches the eyes. And, if you use the template that USA Jobs, it just, to me, it looks kind of boring. It just looks bland, right? It's like block letters. It just, nothing really draws you in. I don't think it really makes you stand out. And so maybe, right, you kind of peacock a little bit if you kind of go against the grain, right? I don't know if it works, but that's kind of what I went with. Another thing I forgot to tell them is I know I've heard a lot of times like you want to tailor your resume to mirror the requirements of the position, and you can do that, but again, it's a time suck, right? Because each position you apply for, you're going to go and you're going to modify your resume to make it align better with the position. But I mean, you're only increasing the likeliness that you're going to screw up the resume and put typos and stuff in there every time you mess with it. So that's a risk. And so if you're going to change it, then you're going to want to review it like 10 times to make sure there's not a typo in there. And so it just, just kind of opportunity cost, just kind of looking at the value of time. I was like, I'd rather just have the finalized product. It's in a PDF. It's not going to get messed with, and just use that. Because I knew there were no typos in it. I had multiple people review it and, caught all the errors. So that was kind of my strategy.
Man, that's good to know. If I open up my Google Docs right now and I look at all the resumes I've submitted, that, because I tend to tailor my resume to every position, there's got to be at least 100 in there. And it is time consuming because I'm constantly having to go in there. I'm looking at the GS positions and what they require, and I'm trying to mirror that to kind of find some kind of transition or, something that kind of stands out that I can put based on my experience as to what they're looking for. So yeah, it is kind of a time suck to do the tailored thing, but no, that's good to know, man. I think your qualifications just spoke for themselves when it came to your resume. There was no need for really tailoring that. It just spoke themselves. That's good information. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And I know you mentioned before we started recording, like you were mainly looking at like 300 series, and just maybe to expand on that just a slight little bit, did you ever like look at the actual 300 series position description and maybe look at that, or you strictly just created the resume and just sent it?
So one thing I realized kind of early on in the journey, right, is if you want to maximize your earning potential, right, you are going to be kind of typecast. And I talked about this with Andrew early on, because it stands true, but the only opportunities to interview I got were for, administrator / operations manager type roles in legal organizations, which is exactly what I've done for 14 years. Right. Mm-hmm. And so unless you're willing to kind of start at the bottom at the totem pole and work your way up again, which I wasn't, because I'm 40. I have aspirations of retiring one day. I've got a family. And so I came to the realization, like, I wasn't going to get a chance to kind of break out of my shell, which eventually I kind of, accepted. But then, kind of how you, how are your skills best aligned is just looking at the different series of jobs. Specifically, I'm just talking about the federal government. But yeah, no, I mean, looking in the 300 series, and they cover a bunch of different, you're talking program management, project management, analysis. You're talking administrative officer, which is 341, which is where I say I got the majority of the hits as far as the federal side. Because it's exactly what I did, right? It's managing operations, it's doing hiring, HR functions and hiring manager functions, and managing, financial management and managing resources and being the approving official and billing official, and all the things that I had literally done like verbatim for the last 14 years was the requirements of most of those jobs. So it was, it's kind of like an easy kind of a no-brainer, easy transition. So yeah, I would say the majority of the positions I applied for were 300 series, just because they aligned, most or to the greatest extent of what I had done in my military career. Although this position was a 900 series, which it was kind of an outlier, but
right. Well, your resume is an outlier too. So.
Yeah.
And I think also your overall approach to just this whole thing, like you looked at it from more of a what was more or less time consuming, and how much time and effort were you actually going to have to spend, and then you spent the majority of that time just applying rather than sitting there trying to tweak the resume and make it perfect. So I think that's a very interesting approach.
I think time played I started early. I started really early. Like I said, I started applying for jobs like last March, just to get, reps in, see what the process was like. getting, not getting referred because I didn't click the right radio buttons. It was just a learning experience. And then I think I finally got my first interview like the end of the summer, like August. So there is, you gotta, what was the term I was going to use? You got to build basically the pipeline, right? You got to build the pipeline just to allow for the lead time of, the process, which it varies in organizations. Some it's fast. I know one organization I applied for, they were really fast, but most are really a long time. And so you got to build the pipeline. It's going to take several months. So I started applying in March. I didn't get my first hit till August, right? But then if I stop applying in like April and just wait, then if I don't get the jobs in August, then I got to build up the pipeline again. So again, starting early, volume, being consistent, right? Don't just apply for a bunch of jobs and then don't do anything for 2 weeks, right? So at first I was applying, maybe once a week I'd go in and apply for a handful of jobs. And as I got closer to the exit of my military service, I was, I probably looked nightly. Every night I'd look, and I got, I set up the automatic updates to see when new positions hit. So then it was almost a daily process at night. I'd probably set aside some time just to look and see if there was anything. So yeah, really, it was kind of weird when I didn't have to apply anymore. I was so used and regimented to it. It's like, oh man, I can turn off all the notifications. I don't need to apply for more jobs. And even after I accepted this position, I actually got a couple more phone calls for offers to interview. And I was happy to say I'd already accepted something because they took so long.
Yeah, and I kind of want to tap on that a little bit. I've experienced the same with the government hiring process as far as the GS positions are concerned versus contracting. Like it seems like contracting, if you go to a job fair or if you have someone to mention your name or bring your resume to work with them to give it to the hiring manager or officials, like it seems like on the contracting side and on the regular civilian side is much faster. And again, I haven't been in the contracting world since probably 2007-8, so it's been quite a while, but it seems a lot faster, the hiring process versus the GS process. And as you mentioned, some of those positions you apply for, they just stay open. They don't close, and they just say reviewing. So it's kind of like looking at social media metrics. Like if you're looking to see who's liked your posts, like you can't look at the list of jobs that you've applied for because a lot of that stuff just doesn't get updated. But what are your feelings about that? Because my feelings personally is like if they're not hiring fast enough, they're actually letting really good talent go. And you kind of mentioned that before we started recording again. But yeah, what do you think about that?
I get the position description. I've got to build out the evaluation questions for her to put in the announcement. We have to put an announcement date. We have to. So I've seen that, and then I see what happens when I get all the applications in. Like someone has to review the applications. Usually it was me. And I know for some positions, we'd get like over 100 applications. And it's like, I only have so much time in the day. I've got other things I got to do, right? I got to manage a budget. I supervise other employees. I've got to go to meetings. And it's like, so by the time an announcement would close and I had to print off a stack of 100 resumes, I still needed to find the time to go through them just so I could qualify the first, the top 25, put together a hiring panel of other people who have regular jobs, right? This is like an additional duty of usually pretty senior people, and get them in a room, get them to review all the resumes, score them. Then I have to consolidate their scores, put together a metric so we can, maybe interview half a dozen people, schedule the interviews, right? Get everybody like schedule aligned with the people we're interviewing, have the interviews, then get the panel's feedback, score that, then actually get it to the hiring manager, then have them decide if they want to go with the recommendation. Maybe they want a follow-up interview with this candidate. And then after they decided that, then I have to get it back to the hiring manager who's old, or not the hiring manager. I have to get back to the HR specialist who can actually make the offer. And I mean, you're talking like a multi-month process because there's so many roadblocks because it's such a regimented. Man, if I go apply for a job at like Microsoft, I mean, if they wanted to, they could hire me the same day. It's at-will employment, right? Just we'll put you on the payroll, you start tomorrow. And so it's the bureaucracy of the government. Not to say that bureaucracy is always bad, but it can stagnate, the process, those bottlenecks. Plus, the whole process from an agency side is everybody else is taking this on as an additional duty. They have regular day jobs, right? But when they need to hire somebody, they have to make time in their schedule to serve as, on a hiring panel, basically. So, it's not it's not a perfect system. It might not even be a great system, but that's the system they have. So they can miss out on talent, right? Like I said, I'd gotten offers after I accepted this one because I didn't hear from them through the holiday season, because I'm assuming people took 2 weeks off. And so by the time they came back to work in early January and offered me a position, I was like, sorry, I already accepted something. I mean, I didn't tell them to their face they were too slow, but they were too slow. So, I got the offer from the agency that didn't take 2 weeks off during the holiday season. So, you can't just, if you're searching for talent, you can't just assume they're going to wait for you. And, you're the only job they're applying for, because most likely other people, they're applying for other positions at other organizations. So if you want somebody, you gotta be on it. So.
Now, was your interview for this Department of Labor position, was that a telephonic or was that in person, video, or how'd that work?
That was telephonic. So there were actually 2 in-person interviews I did. I actually flew out to Indianapolis for one and then drove up to Philadelphia for another. I didn't get offers on either of those positions, but those were the only 2. And then I think about, I probably had about a dozen other interviews and they were all telephonic. Because again, I mean, really it's getting, scheduling, right? Like I talked about, getting, there were times I think I was in a hiring panel was like 5 or 6 people. So you can imagine trying to get 5 or 6 people to clear their schedule. And most of the time they weren't even in the same location, right? I applied with multiple positions at DOJ. And so it'd usually be the leadership from that office I was applying at, but then they didn't have any resident experience on administrative officers type stuff because that's the position they were hiring for. So they had to reach out to, their sister offices and different geographical reasons to get their administrative officers to come sit on the panel. So it wasn't even internal to that agency. So yeah, you can imagine, the logistics of trying to get 5 people schedules aligned to do interviews.
Yeah, and that's so the interview is a big thing, especially the video interview. So I've sat on panels before, at work where we were hiring folks, and at one point we had 3 candidates. 2 of them were prior military, and one of them was retired from the police department. And, they both showed up with, suits and ties on, the Zoom call. The last one, we didn't even consider him, though he was qualified. He showed up with a raggedy T-shirt, looked like he just woke up, so the presence was there. Even on video, the presence was, the contrast of that was incredible. But yeah, it is how you show up as well. Luckily you had yours in person, right? So you can, you knew you had to wear a suit, things like that. But I think too many people discount that. Like, I'm just going to wear a T-shirt or something on video. At least that's what I encountered. It didn't work out well for the gentleman, unfortunately. We all kind of looked at each other like, is this for real? Is this serious?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good point. No, I mean, I just suit and tie for every interview, telephonic or in person. I think, the last couple at the end, because after a while you get exhausted, right? After I'd been over I'm just like, I didn't even want to interview. It was just exhausting. So you get dressed up. And so by the end I was wearing jeans, but you'd only see my upper torso. So it'd be shirt, tie, blazer, but I would have jeans on instead of my actual suit pants. But yes, but it's interesting. But I mean, another point I'd like to bring out, I kind of forgot, but it's like a 2-way interview, right? And everyone's the pressure of, I want them to like me. But at the same time, when you're interviewing, you want to make sure the people that you could potentially be working with are people you'd want to work with. Because I had a couple disaster interviews where at the end I was like, I don't want to work for that agency. If they offered me the position, I would turn it down. One interview, I think there was four people on the panel. I was the only one with my camera on. So I was talking to 4 blank screens. How do you think that made me feel? Very uncomfortable. And I got an offer for that job and I turned it down. Because it's if you don't even have the decency to turn your camera on to see me, but it's why would I want to work for you? And then another one, it was, I felt very kind of defensive, right? They had asked me a question about the city that they were located on. What do you like about this city? And I'm like, I'm not really coming there to work in the city. I'm coming there for the opportunity to work your organization. So I felt like I was really on the defensive on it. It didn't go well. And so, yeah, I would say, just it's a two-way, interview, right? Because you want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the people that you're going to be working with in the future.
Not only
a
that,
couple
I mean, if you think about the application process itself, I've experienced this a number of times, and I actually literally experienced it yesterday. It was applying. I've been waiting for paperwork for a position that I've been selected for and supposed to be hired for, but I'm still applying for jobs because you never know what the government can say at the end of the day. The last minute, they could be like, sorry, the position doesn't exist anymore. So as I'm applying for a job just yesterday, and it's happened about 2 or 3 times, you get to like this questionnaire that goes through, like, you have to answer these 3 sets of questions, and each set of questions is like 15 to 30 questions. And I started it, and the very first question was like, there's 5 people, and this person starts doing this thing before this person, and then the other person starts doing this thing after this. I was like, you know what? I mean, I did the questionnaire, but at the end of it, I was like, I don't think I would really even, if this is one of the requirements to work for you, and it's just like it's a test of comprehension, of course, but it's really just rudimentary. Like, they grabbed it from somewhere and somebody said it was great, so they implement it as their kind of litmus test for their potential candidates. Like, I agree with you. Even at that point, when you're reading through the job announcement, reading through the description, if there's typos in the description, like, come on, man. You want me to be perfect, but you don't want to bring your A game on the announcement. So even then, in those situations, like, you need to figure out if that's somebody you want to actually work with, somebody you want to spend day in and day out with in the office. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I can attest to me having to go through some of that. I mean, there were some agencies, not all. There was maybe like 1 or 2 that I recall that had, you'd fill out the application, you do a self-assessment, and then you'd get like an email like, you have to take this supplementary assessment, and it was a comprehension, and it was just, I mean, do I really want to invest 30 minutes to take this test when I could be applying for other jobs? And the first couple times I did it, and by the end I do it, and I just wouldn't even look at the question, the answers. I was just like, next. Like, if you don't want to qualify me for this, that's fine, but I'm not giving up my valuable time, for the likelihood is, I'm never going to hear from you again. So why am I going to waste my time? Another thing, you actually did bring a good point. I do want to let people know, just again, because I kind of have the insider experience, but on those self-assessments on USA Jobs, like you like, I am an expert in this area. I performed it, for whatever, I can't remember, right? But it goes from basically 0 to 5. So when you apply for a job, right, it's called a self-assessment. You'll be scored against your competition. Like, some people will, they'll say I'm, 99th percentile. Some people will be like 40, right? Based on your self-assessment of your ability to fulfill the requirements. But the HR specialist will ask you as the hiring manager, like, do you want a cutoff, right? Do you only want to see applications above the 70th, the 80th, the 90th percentile? So if you don't score yourself high enough, I mean, you could basically be outing yourself, right? So I would say, and obviously don't over embellish, but I would say I would not want to be below 90% in the self-assessment. Just no, because I mean, you're just at the end, like, let them make that decision. Don't make the decision for them that you're not qualified enough to know. Because if I say, yeah, I only want to see people that scored above that self-assessed at 90%, I'm not even going to see the resumes that were 89 and below, because I didn't want to see them, because there were enough people that scored themselves. So yeah, don't be overcritical when you're filling those out. My experience was I put I'm an expert of just about everything. Maybe there were like, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 that I didn't say I was an expert. I was like, a step or 2 below that, just to make sure I was probably somewhere in the 90% range. So people didn't blatantly call me a liar. But, it's the process, it's the game. And so you just got to know how to play. And so that's honestly how it works from the hiring side. I'm not sure if too many people know that.
Yeah, that's something I encountered when I was applying too, was, I have 0 experience, or I'm an expert. I do this every single day in my work day, something like that. And I asked around about that, and they're like, yeah, oh yeah, put that you're an expert in everything. But I'm like, what? Well, it all depends on the job you're applying for, right? Like, me being a military justice guy, if I'm applying for something else like logistics, I'm not going to put that I'm an expert. I'm not even going to apply for that job, right? So you have to know, I think you have to know your limits as well, right? Maybe that job might not be for you because you don't have the experience. You're not an expert in that. Chances are you're not going to get that position. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but also for folks out there listening, know your limits. Don't apply for something that you're not actually, because they're going to ask you questions about it at some point in time. And if you don't know, you're probably not going to get that position.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, I agree 100%. Like, I mean, if I'm reading through the questions and like everything, I'm like, yeah, I really don't know anything about that, and I get about like 3 or 4 of those. It's like, this is probably not the position for you. Like, sure, you might be able to fool them enough to look at your resume, but pretty soon they're going to figure out that you're not really qualified. So then you're just kind of wasting everybody's time, including your own. So, what's the point? Really, but yeah, good point. I wouldn't be applying for jobs where I'm, loading artillery rounds or something, because I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at doing that. And then I get to the interview and they're like, tell us about loading artillery rounds. And I'd be like, yeah.
Let's shift over to like healthcare / BDD, and whichever one we want to tackle first, or if we want to tackle only one and not the other. But I know you had some questions about healthcare, and maybe we can just talk it through here in the forum.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Personally,
yeah. So, I mean, kind of just knock out where I'm at with BDD. I actually have my first C&P exam tomorrow. It's I've got two telehealth appointments and 2 in-person appointments. They start tomorrow, and then I think I've got one maybe a week or so after that, and a couple more in early February. So that's where I'm at. I submitted the claim in mid-December. I think I probably got a call from, and I think OptumServe is one of the 3 contractors the VA uses. It might have been early January. It could have been late December, where they just reached out to kind of get your schedule, to schedule appointments, like what's your flexibility. And at the time I didn't have anything lined up for a job. So I just told them my schedule was wide open. And then a couple weeks later, they probably started scheduling me appointments. I had to go back and reschedule them, which you only get one reschedule. I learned. And then when you reschedule, you can only reschedule it within 1 week of that. So that's what I was told. And so they rescheduled me because like the first one they wanted was like my first week at my new job on like Thursday in the middle of the day. And I'm like, that's not going to work for me. So I was able to push it off a couple weeks. So that's where I'm out with that. But I'm not sure if I talked about it, but the VSO, aid I ended up going with, I got referrals. Like I said, I get referrals for everything, right? People that have had positive experiences. So, ended up going with, an old colleague who retired, a year or so before me. I ended up using the rep that they used, was very helpful, was very responsive, because I reached out to multiple VSO reps who weren't that responsive. And so I kind of just, eliminated them. But yeah, I had a call with him. He had my file or my records for probably a month to review everything. We had a follow-up call, and then he put in the, after our follow-up call, he put them in, or put the claim in on my behalf in mid-December. So that's wrong with that. So I'm sure there'll be more stories to talk about that and be some battles, but that's wrong with that. But yeah, getting into healthcare, right? So it's like now it's like I'm an adult again, right? It's like I have autonomy in my life. Now I got to like do adult things. And even being with someone like me who's like almost, on the cusp of 41 years old, it's like, it's kind of how do I say it? It's almost kind of liberating when you lose your decision-making authority, right? When you're in the military, you don't get to pick your healthcare, you don't get to pick your dentist. And so it's almost like you've got some ignorance is bliss. Like my hands are tied. I can't make a decision. This is what I've been told to do, so I have to. So it's like you don't have to make the decisions because it's been taken out of your hands. But then when you're done, it's like, okay, well, now I got to do what the rest of, the American population does, which was like paying for healthcare and picking a plan that works for you and navigating that. So I haven't, I'm looking at my options. Again, I love referrals. So I'm talking to colleagues that have already retired. Who did you end up going with? Are you happy with it? To try to make the decision. I think ultimately it's going to be a TRICARE type program, whether it's prime or standard, or they have a John Hopkins Healthcare, which is basically like TRICARE Prime up in this regional area. So just kind of go into that, because I've heard good stories, bad stories. So, I still got, some time to figure it out. Ultimately, I've got healthcare through the end of March. If I want to pay out of pocket, I can start on a new program before then. And then same thing with dental and vision, which I'll probably end up going through, but my federal agency, because, from what I'm looking, they've got better rates than you can get just on the open market. So, but again, you got to, now you're in the point where you got to do your due diligence, do your research, and, make an informed decision that's best for you and the family. So, just another stressor to add, but I mean, it's things that normal people do every day. So you kind of got to get used to making, big boy and big girl decisions, because, the federal government isn't going to, force you to, or going to make the decision for you, I should say.
It definitely feels like you're a grown up now once you start getting these emails, especially from my HR saying, hey, look, we need you to pick something because it's open season right now. You have until, January, whatever, to choose your, healthcare, dental, vision, whatever. And it was just a flood of information. And if you have not received all that information yet, be prepared to, because you're going to have to look at prices. You're going to have to look at what each thing entails. I get 2 visits at the optometrist versus 1, I have to pay an extra $16 a month versus not, so it is a flood of information. But I mean, it's doable. It's the same thing you said, civilians have been doing it for the longest time. We've been kind of in this cushy little bubble as military where everything gets taken care of for us. You don't pick your dentist, you don't pick your doc or anything like that. But now, it's grown up rules. You got to do all the legwork. You got to do the research. You got to make sure that you're getting the best deal for you and your family. So just be prepared for that flood of information coming your way.
Yep. No, I'm aware. I've got, I think they give you 60, it's in the federal government, you get 60 days to pick a program. Yeah. So I've got a little time, right? I just started. So just doing the research, talk to people, see what they like. And at some point I'll, make a decision. We'll kind of go with that.
And the best thing is you're still covered under TRICARE until you actually have your end of active service date. So you have time to research all that.
Yep. Exactly.
So that's good.
And also for like the TRICARE people, or people who are going to continue to use TRICARE, like myself, I'm continuing to use TRICARE because I'm in a foreign country and there's no American healthcare places except for on the base. So figuring out like your location in relation to any healthcare facilities or places where you can go through TRICARE, depending on if you're TRICARE Prime or if you're TRICARE Standard or whatever it happens to be. Trying to figure that out as well, because it makes a difference, right? It's if you're outside of the distance of getting that care from that specific location, then it kind of just negates the fact to even have that brand of healthcare, and maybe switching it over to something that makes a little bit more sense. And I'm not sure if you have to actually wait for the enrollments to come around for that or not, but it's also definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, just from the little research I've done so far, I mean, TRICARE, price comparison, it's not even close. It appears to be like the best healthcare deal ever, right? And so I think, Victor, you're telling me, and I think I looked, it's in the low 700s for an annual premium for a family, $730, $40. I was looking at some plans through my employer. And I mean, for, pretty good health coverage, I think Blue Cross Blue Shield, you're looking at like 300, and this is a good one, like $350 a month. So, you're
getting a good deal with TRICARE.
Almost at $4,000 a month just for premiums versus TRICARE, which is under $1,000. So, yeah, that's why I said it's, I haven't talked to any retirees yet that have not taken some type of TRICARE type program. Some have done Prime, some have done, I don't know, Select or Standard, so there's options out there, but I think, and I don't know the quality of care, but, from a pure monetary standpoint, TRICARE Prime for retirees appears to be, the best deal on the block.
Oh yeah. And you mentioned that you're doing your BDD as well.
Yep. Yeah.
So the benefits delivery at Discharge. Yeah. So that's our. So you have, you're kind of in the middle of it because you still have to take your C&P exams, and then they use all that stuff to kind of complete your VA disability on the back end, right?
Yeah.
So I understand the C&P exams, they go quick. They're like, you're in there for about 30 minutes with the doc. They ask you all these sorts of questions. But the BDD is an excellent program. Because I mean, at least in my experience, 11 days after my EAS, I received my VA disability rating. Some people it takes a couple months, and I don't know whether it was because it was a new year or what, but yeah, the BDD is an excellent program. As far as your C&Ps are, so for me, for instance, they had me drive out 3 hours to get one of my C&P exams. Are you scheduled to drive anywhere or go anywhere crazy to go get these C&P exams?
Actually, no, I'm not. And just to touch on that, I think BDD, if you, I mean, everyone can take advantage of it. It's just, are you going to make it a priority? Because you do have the window, right? Between 180 days and 90 days, you have to get it in. So mark that on your calendars, because it front loads you, right? So the goal of the program is you get your rating within 30 days of your, after you come off active service, which obviously you did at 11. But otherwise, if you don't get it in, you go to the back of the line, which is every other veteran that's submitting a claim, whether they just got out or they've been out 50 years. I mean, you're in the queue like everybody else. So you get priority if you get the BDD. So do it, because who wants to go to the back of the line when they're offering to put you in the, the very front? So take advantage. But no, luckily for me, I mean, it's the DC area, it's the DMV. So, there's a vast amount of different medical providers just because of the big metropolitan area. So no, I think I think it's a little bit south of me here in Virginia. I think the other one might be up in like southern Maryland, which it's within probably 45 minutes, so nothing crazy. And like I said, 2 of them are telephonic. So the one I think for behavioral health, and then the one for hearing, no, I take that back. The one for behavioral health and the other one for, I think it's like TBI, brain injury, those are telephonic. And then the rest are in person. One's for hearing, and the other one's basically going to be all the physical ailments. It's kind of crazy how they come up with their the amount of time, because obviously it's just calculated, right? They average. But they told me my appointment for my physical one was going to be 520 minutes. And I'm like, that's like over 8 hours. And you scheduled me the appointment at 1:45 in the afternoon. I know there's no way you're keeping me till like 10 at night. So how did you come up with that number? So I hope it's not 520 minutes, but that's what they advised me when they made the appointment for me.
No, I don't think it's going to be that long. At least mine wasn't that long. It was a fraction of that time. But one thing I was always told by folks, when you go to do your C&P exams, is it's not about how you feel that day. It's about the worst pain you've ever felt. Like, for instance, I've had multiple car accidents in the past. I have, issues with my back. At that point in time, when I went to go take my C&P exam, it wasn't, the worst pain, but it does get pretty bad in the mornings, or, when I just get out of bed. And that's probably, I told the doc, hey, look, usually feels like a 7 out of 10, etc. So that's one thing I was told during the, when you're taking your C&P exams. Let them know about the worst pain that you felt, and not about the pain that you currently feel. Because if you're telling them, hey, I'm at a 1 out of 10, I feel great, well, that's going to be the check in the box. Hey, he feels great. No disability for this guy. So just kind of keep that in mind, when you take these C&P exams.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard the same thing. Actually, my cousin's husband was medically discharged out of the Air Force, and he told the same thing. He's like, when you go, you want to go on, what your worst day looks like, not your best day. And so that was his advice. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of my plan, because I know when you do like range of motion and things like that, you want to stop right when you feel discomfort, right? You don't want to push it like, oh, I can touch my toes, but it starts hurting, really bad when I get past 30 degrees. Like, you want to stop right when you feel discomfort. Yeah, that's why I said I'm still obviously a little nervous, because I've never experienced this before, and I don't want to slip up, say the wrong thing, and so, because I mean, I think probably most of the stories you hear are when people have bad experiences. Like, people don't rant and rave when they have great experiences with anything, right? But it's when you see the bad ones, those are the ones that, people make videos and bad reviews and things like that. So then you always think, everything's, you're in defensive mode because you're going to have a bad experience. So just kind of trying to prepare for that mentally. Like I said, do a little research tonight, look over the DBQ that they'll be using for my C&Ps for my first one tomorrow, and kind of just go from there.
Yeah, and if I could, I mean, Victor has some really good tips on this. I mean, as far as going through this process and really breaking it down. And we talked about it in another video, but Victor, you had mentioned also, like, I mean, let's be honest, it's subjective, right? You're dealing with whoever the doctor is on whatever day they happen to be in. So that's part of the equation. But going in with a good attitude. And then you had also mentioned something about bringing a copy, at least for the in-person ones, bringing a copy of your records. And I think you said you had it tabbed out. Can you speak to that real quick?
That's right. So for each one of my appointments, let's say like the range of motion or the physical that I had to take, I had an extra copy of all my medical records pertaining to that C&P exam. And usually you only have a 30-minute window. At least that's what I had when I went to go do my stuff. So the doc is there asking you questions. He's kind of looking through your medical record as he's doing. He's jotting down notes. So I provided them a copy of my tabbed out medical record pertaining to that piece of physical that I was taking. And it kind of made it a little bit easier for them. I tabbed it out, wrote it on there. Hey, look, here's my injury from my back, my shoulder, etc. And at least the doctor seemed grateful for it. He's like, "Oh, you saved me some time here." Flipped to the page, wrote down some notes. And I think that kind of worked in my favor instead of them having to go search for everything, even though that's their job, right? To go look through all your medical records. I think just kind of tabbing it out, highlighting it for them kind of helped them out a little bit. So yeah, I don't know if people have time to do that. At least I did it because I was on terminal leave when I had my C&P exams. So I had a whole lot of time to look through all my medical records, make extra copies, scan everything and provide all these things to the doc. I also went into great detail on that form that they send you for your, I think it's the company that was contracted was like QSF, I believe. They send you a form asking you like, when did you encounter this injury? How much does it hurt, etc. I went into like really great detail on all that stuff, providing dates, times, incidents, things like that. And I think that also helped out my situation as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really helpful. The only problem is my medical records are like over 1,500 pages. So I don't know about the time to go through.
It's tough.
I mean, I can, and I probably will try to go back. Hopefully because they're staggered out. I've got 4 separate appointments. Maybe I can find time to prepare before each one. But no, that's great advice. And it's good to know that if you actually bring a copy of the physical, diagnosis, that actually helps them in their process. That's great advice.
Whatever I could do to make their life a little bit easier and not seem like the disgruntled veteran or military person coming in, give me my exam, I'm pissed off. I didn't want to seem like that. So I was, of course, very polite. Here's my medical stuff. It may help you out. They seem nice. They seem to take a liking to that. So I felt good about it, at least.
Yeah. Now, did they take that piece of, that medical record and like put it in their notes or their files or anything like that? Or did they don't know that they put it in
their files. They didn't give it back to me. So I don't know that he asked me, hey, do you need this back? I said, no, that's an extra copy I have, for your records if you need to use it, whatever. And they kept it. So I don't know if they just shred it right after. I don't know what they did with it.
No, but I mean, it might help them with their write-up, right? The medical terminology, the dates, things like that. They can refer to that instead of having to scribble down the notes of what diagnosis, what date you got it, so good to know.
Well, cool, guys. Let's just wrap it there. I mean, we're at an hour and we can definitely come back and talk more about this because we still got a lot more transition for Justin to go through. But until next time, if you need to check us out on the internet, we are all over the podcast platforms. We are also on Wreaths Across America on Wednesdays at 11 p.m. And we're actually going to be moving the release of these videos on YouTube to Wednesdays to match that time frame. So usually released on Mondays, now released on Wednesdays. Thanks everybody for checking us out, for sitting with us. Thank you, Victor, for all of your information and knowledge and being a gracious host on this show with me.
Of course.
And thank you, Justin, for taking time out and being here with us again and getting us up to date and up to speed on what you've been going through and some really good tactical tips for the audience. So appreciate both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me
Anytime.
on. I'm happy to share. Hopefully people can, benefit from my experience and your experience and Victor's experience, just, to help them, kind of lower the learning curve a little bit.
That's what it's all about. All right, gentlemen, until next time.
All right.
Talk to you later. Thank you.
Later.